Today's show is sponsored by the ABV Barrel Shop. The ABV Barrel Shop is located in the St. Louis metro community of Arnold, Missouri, and is the world's first single barrel only liquor store. This business is owned and operated by Steve Akeley and Jim Fosnot. Head over to abvbarrelshop.com to sign up for their email and text distribution list. That way you'll know what they have in stock, what classes are coming up, and what barrel picks they have in the works. We are also sponsored by The Bar to Go. The Bar to Go offers a fully customizable carrying case that allows you to take your favorite distilled spirits or cocktail ingredients with you. Whether you're looking for yourself, a customized gift, or logo items for your business or event, The Bar to Go can help. Check them out at thebar2go.com. Use the number 2 when you type out The Bar to Go. Did you know Neely Family Distillery now ships its popular distilled spirits directly to you? To order, simply call 859-394-3258. Tell them the ABV Network sent you. And now, on to the show. Hey gang, it's Steve again, enjoying some time off. Hopefully you are having some time off as well as we get closer and closer to Christmas. This kicks off a special week of shows where we bring in interviews from the Bourbon Show. We've never done this really before, where we've cross-promoted the two shows by incorporating them into one another. But we thought this might be a good idea. I know that there is a big audience, and there certainly are plenty of people that listen to both. But these are some older interviews too, so even if you are a Bourbon Show listener as well as the Bourbon Daily, you might not have heard these. So the first one coming up here is Jerry Dalton. You're going to be hearing a lot about him. We got a movie coming out about him next year. So here is our original interview with Jerry. Enjoy.
Let's drink!
Welcome to the Bourbon Show, starring Steve Akeley and Renee Howe. Today on the show, we're talking to Jerry Dalton, Master Distiller Emeritus for Jim Beam. My name is Jeremy Schell. Joining us today is very special guest host, Evan Haskell. Let's start the show.
Hey gang, what's up?
Hey.
How's it going?
Good. So yeah, we've got a funny show today in that Renee is with us now for this part of it, the first part of the segment. Renee is working, so she's going to have to leave us for the actual interview part of it.
Yeah.
She will join us at the end though, and in between Evan, who's not here right now because he's working right now, he is going to take a break and go to a conference room, and then he will join us for the interview. So it's confusing. You may want to write all that down, folks.
I have a theory here. I think Evan is actually Renee. You never see those two together at the same place. You never hear them together at the same place.
Yeah, it's
As
funny business.
Bring it up. They do look very similar.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think Evan is secretly this internet sensation that just shows up just with good photography and T-shirts.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And no facial hair.
Right. Yeah, that's key. So
That's right.
Yeah.
That's how he changes his look. Cool. Well, I had something cool happen today. So this is really pretty wild. So I wanted to tell you guys about it. Very excited. I didn't tell you before we started here. But Adam Stumpf called me today and said, hey, Kent Mace is here. Now, the audience doesn't know who Kent Mace is, so I headed over there. He's like, can you make it over here? So I did. Kent Mace actually won one of our Patreon contests, and it was the one where Adam Stumpf was going to design the individual winner got to design a whiskey of their choice. They get to come up with the mash bill. Adam is going to make it. He's going to do a full run through his still. Ends up making probably 8 barrels of whiskey, which is a pretty significant amount. Now, it's Adam's company. He owns the whiskey. He'll ultimately decide what he wants to do with it. He could sell it in the gift shop. He could sell it as a one-time type of deal. But it's an honor to be able to if you don't own a distillery, to develop something yourself and then have it made and then see how it goes. And Adam's going to send him samples throughout the year. But Adam didn't tell me beforehand. I didn't realize this. I knew that Kent lives in Oklahoma, So I, just thought they would talk over the phone. Well, it turns out he and his wife drove in and did a one-on-one meeting with Adam because they wanted to go through it. And they wanted to see his place and all that. And so it ended up being really cool. They called me and I went over there and it was just great. And to hear from him and his wife and, what the shows mean to them, you kind of forget that. We're just three of us right now. This is all I'm in my basement. Renee's in her bedroom. Jeremy's in an office that he's got at his house. And it's just the three of us talking, and we forget the impact that these shows have on people. And they were telling me how much it means to them, how much they enjoy it. Obviously, Kent has been into bourbon for a long time. His wife hasn't, but she's kind of got into it now because she listens to the shows. It was just cool.
Yeah, that's very cool.
That is really odd. If you think about it, that's a Patreon prize. I mean, that's something just for supporting the show. And obviously, we're not out here begging for contributions and support, but if people are enjoying, this is great entertainment. If they're enjoying it, we certainly would love for them to support us.
Mm-hmm.
And to be able to have that opportunity, that is so. I mean, I don't think I've never done that. I mean, that would just be an awesome.
I've never done it either.
Yeah, that would. Really cool thing to do.
Yeah.
I'm a little jealous now.
That's what I said too. And Kent was like, "Don't be jealous." It was a cool thing. And but it was really neat that he ended up winning. Really a pretty kind of a special thing. There's a couple connections there, and I don't know how much he wants me to share, but it was pretty amazing that that he won, and I was really happy that he did. And it ended up being something really cool and very meaningful for him too, to be involved in this. And there's a connection that he and Adam have that is pretty awesome. So yeah, it was really neat meeting him. Just great people. We talked for a while, and then we went out to lunch, and it was just a good time. And they were heading back to Oklahoma. They just came in just to do that. Yeah.
Oh wow,
amazing.
Yeah,
just a way to spend the day.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, they were as excited as can be, and I'm happy for them, and I can't wait. I'm going to try that whiskey. I told Adam when he's making that, I want to get some right as it comes off the still. I'm going to try it. So yeah.
For as many times as Adam's been on the shows, and I think for as much promotion as they've gotten out of that, do you think they'd let us do our own mash bill?
You would think.
We're not asking for it, but like,
no. I kept dropping the hints with Adam. I'm like, boy, that's the neatest prize ever, and we'll never top that. And it's so cool. And
it's not like it's a requirement that he'll ever be back on the show again unless he does this. Right, Adam?
Right?
Yes. Yeah. So, okay. Yeah, it was fun, though. And, it's also an amazing thing. I've never met Kent, never talked to him before. And it's a weird situation, too, because they know so much about me. I mean, they listen to the shows.
Yes.
It's awesome.
Yeah, it's a weird thing, when we're on these. And because, again, it's just three people talking. This is what we are right now. That's it.
Yeah.
Pretty much, yeah.
Sometimes we forget that we're recording this, and we just start talking, and we go into our tangents, and we share some of our personal stuff, and then people come up to you and they'll start talking about it. You're like, how do you know about that?
So, very cool, very cool. It was a special day. So, congratulations again to Kent on winning that, and I can't wait to try that whiskey. So right now, of course, we drink. We drink on the show like every other one on the network. What's everyone drinking, Renee? We'll start with you.
It's starting to warm up a little bit here, so I thought I might as well, drink some of these high proofers while I still have the coldness about.
Yep.
So I'm gonna have some Bookers.
Okay. Oh, it's a good choice for today, I would say.
I can't. It's really hard to get these corks out.
Yeah. Oh, that was actually pretty good. Yeah.
Oh, okay, good.
Yeah, that was good. Good base one. So
wow, that was good.
Yeah, not bad. I'll go next. I've got a bottle here, well loved. I also went with the Beam since I thought it was kind of a good theme here.
Yep.
So I went with OGD, Old Granddad 114. So I don't expect much. Yeah. This is not typically a good cork pop anyway with these big corks.
No.
You think they're good, but they're really not. So here we go. Ooh.
Okay.
Not bad.
Not bad.
I think Renee got me there though. So
yeah,
Renee's leading right now. Jeremy, can you beat that?
I don't know. This is a pretty well-loved bottle, and it seemed appropriate for today, but it's also the Booker's Rye from 2016.
Oh, yes.
Wow.
And I would say this is probably one of my favorite ryes I've ever had.
Yeah.
Oh, awesome.
Okay. Yeah. I don't know. Boy, that was as close as can be. We need to go to the judges. Yeah. What do you think, Jeremy?
I believe the judge ruled on this one. I think, they were both really good. I was actually surprised how well that OGD did.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
I think Renee had you.
Thank you.
So, yeah,
thank you.
Yeah,
I thought I did as well.
Of course. Cheers, gang.
Cheers.
Cheers.
All right. What we do next is we have our Hall of Fame induction ceremony. So a Bourbon Show Hall of Fame member here, Renee Howe, actually inducts the people now. So it's very exciting for the people to have a fellow Hall of Famer induct them.
It's even more prestigious when it happens this way.
Yes.
Today's inductee started out working in the family import business. After an undergraduate degree at Yale and a law degree at Harvard, our inductee was able to purchase a historic whiskey brand for only $245. This person has managed to not only resurrect the brand, but take it to new heights, including a large-scale production distillery, farm distillery, and one of the most beautiful working distilleries in Kentucky in their new facility in the Fort Nelson building on Whiskey Row. Today, this brand is known for quality and an all-star cast of employees who thrive under his leadership. Ladies and gentlemen, the Bourbon Show Hall of Fame inductee number 43 is Mr. Joe Malioco.
Yeah!
All right.
Joe! Yes.
You will not find a nicer person in the industry.
Oh, yeah.
There's great people around, but he is just the nicest gentleman, both with his time and his information. This couldn't happen to a better person.
Yes.
Yep.
I agree. And, the bourbon industry is filled with great people, but Joe is a standout amongst really great people. I mean,
yes.
You talk about a guy that is just so nice, and, really was a great time talking to him. So, yeah, very cool. Of course, we always say that, the Bourbon Show Hall of Fame is your Hall of Fame. And if you would like to induct someone, please just send us an email and send it to bourbonshowhof@gmail.com. All right. We'd like to talk a little bit about acquisition. Has anybody acquired anything?
Well, so I haven't acquired any new bourbon, but a new whiskey company in Canada sent me a bottle of their Canadian whiskey.
Yeah.
It's called Signal Hill. It comes in a beautiful bottle. It's non-chill filtered.
Okay.
And yeah, I'm excited to try this.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Signal Hill whiskey, yes.
All right. I've got a couple things. I got a media sample of the Four Roses Select, the new one, the small batch Select. So,
yeah, that's exciting.
Really good. I really legitimately like that. So, to me, it's the best of their regular lineup. So they've got 4 products now, and I think that sits atop the hill. That's my favorite of the regular lineup now. So,
yeah, I agree with that.
Yep, very cool. And then the other one, Renee, I don't quite have it yet, but you're going to be interested in this. So, a listener of the show, he lives in the town right next to me. So he's probably 10 minutes from my house or something like that. But he travels to Canada for work, and he told me that he recently was up there. He didn't officially commit this to me. It's like you and your Michter's Toasted Barrel. But he told me, he sent me a message and said, hey, I was able to score 2 Lot 40 cask strengths after I was asking him to look for one for me. I was able to score 2. Who do you think that second one goes to? And of course I was like, me. But I don't have it just yet. So we'll see. We'll see if that happens. But I'm excited about it. Yeah, because you can't get that here in the U.S. So not the cask strength. You can get Lot 40, but not the cask strength.
So I wonder if you're probably going to get the 11 year, which is this year's release. So last year they came out with the 12.
Okay.
But people are saying they like the 11 year better in my whiskey groups.
Okay.
So if you're getting the 11, I only have the 12. I had a sample of the 11. I prefer the 12, but I mean,
I will. I'll report back if I do, in fact, get that. I will report back and let you know what I think. I mean, I'm really excited about it. After talking to Don on the show, I became very, very interested in that. Even after you had talked about it for a while. So cool. What do you got there, Jeremy? You grabbed something. Is that something? Yeah.
Well, actually, so this recently I was able to get the new 13-year Old Fitzgerald Bottled and Bond, which is the new spring release from Heaven Hill. So I have to kind of keep adding that to the collection. But I'm going to talk about this one because this is actually one that other people can get now. It's a barrel that we picked from Copper and Kings as part of the Derby City Bourbon Drinkers group last month. And we took about 2/3 of the barrel. And you can actually get these bottles from the distillery here in Louisville if you're around town. And I got to tell you, I am not a brandy drinker. I've never have been one.
Right.
But when we've tried this, it has got to be one of the most phenomenal drinks I've ever had. And so I'm going to kind of read this off to you.
Okay.
It's titled their Craftwork Redo, and it's a American brandy using the Against the Grain Bow and Luke. So it's a barrel that was aged that had the Bow and Luke Against the Grain beer in it.
Okay.
Then it had the Brooklyn Brewery hand and seal barrels.
Okay.
So it was in that as well. And then it was polished in a new American oak barrel. So this is kind of like a Frankenstein brandy.
Yeah.
But it comes in at 126 proof. The flavors on this thing are just absolutely phenomenal. I think it's picked up something from all the barrels it was in. And so I was just absolutely floored just how good this is. And Steve, I actually have a bottle here for you as well. So next time I see you, I think you'll be amazed just how good this really is.
Yeah.
And, if you could imagine the Midwinter's Night's Dram
Uh-huh.
at 126 proof.
Oh, wow. Yeah. I'm excited about
as close as I could say it is.
Copper and Kings is cool. They're doing some neat stuff there. And yeah, bourbon fans, check them out because they do some things that, very closely measure along with bourbon. And to me, I'm like you. Brandy, I always thought my grandparents used to drink brandy.
Yeah,
and,
exactly.
Yeah, and not good. So yeah, and matter of fact, my grandfather, he would mess with that stuff. He was always a guy who liked science and tinkering and taking things apart. He also liked making a little bit of alcohol from time to time. He'd make his own brandy. It was never good. In the 70s, we were allowed to try stuff as kids. That was a thing. I don't know that today's parents allow that. And they probably shouldn't. So, but when I was a kid, they would be like, you can try a little bit of that. So,
and when I was a kid in the 80s, you always got the little bit of you always got the little last bit of the bottle.
Yeah,
that's right.
So,
that's right. Yeah,
the last little mouthful of beer.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know if you guys can see this. I mean, typically their distillate is clear when they start dumping it somewhere.
Dark.
Just look at the color on it.
Looks like an old Crow
Beautiful
chestnut.
color.
Yeah.
I
It
actually
really
really like the bottle too. I really like it.
The bottles are cool, and if you happen to go by the distillery there to pick these up, they are available at the distillery, and they do have the DCBD logo on the bottle, so you'll know if it's the pick from the Bourbon Group here. So definitely head over there and pick one of those up.
Yeah, very cool. All right, well, we've got a great show today. This is someone that we were interested in literally from the moment that we launched. So back in 2016, we wanted to talk to this individual, and it's finally going to happen today. So, Jeremy, you want to take us out to break?
Our guest today is the only non-Beam family member to be a master distiller for the Beam Company. He served as mentor for Fred Noe until he was ready to take over the reins. We talked to Jerry Dalton, a true legend in the industry, after the break.
Let's talk about the people who make these shows happen. First up is the ABV Barrel Shop. It is the most unique shopping experience in the world of bourbon, as the ABV Barrel Shop only sells single barrels. Owners Steve Akeley and Jim Fosnot select. With over 100 distilleries on board to sell us barrels, we are home to the most unique and diverse barrel pick selections in the bourbon world. By signing up for our email, you will always know what we have in stock. In addition to the single barrels, we'll have a gift shop featuring ABV Barrel Shop as well as ABV Network merchandise. We are partnering with vendors like Art Eatables and Old Man Bay Signs to bring you unique items you can't find anywhere else. We will also have a 24-seat classroom where we are offering educational and fun classes like Breakfast and Bourbon, a series where we pair donuts and bourbon, customer barrel picks, and opportunities to learn from master distillers and other bourbon dignitaries. Best of all, we feature a tasting bar where you can try before you buy. All of this is located in the St. Louis metro community of Arnold, Missouri. If you are in the St. Louis area, please stop by to say hi. If you're traveling in from outside the area, please take advantage of our hotel rates with the Drury Inn and Pear Tree Inn, less than a mile from our shop. This can be done via the links in our Visit St. Louis section on our website. Head over to abvbarrelshop.com to plan your trip. The ABV Barrel Shop. It's where single barrels live. Hi, this is Steve Akeley, owner of the ABV Network. We're sponsored by the Stave and Thief Society. This is where you, a bourbon enthusiast, can expand your knowledge and emerge a bourbon steward. In 2017, I completed my Executive Bourbon Steward certification. It's the most comprehensive bourbon certification program available and connects you with an expansive network of bourbon enthusiasts and professionals. Check out the full listing of in-person and online certifications and join the society today by enrolling at staveandthief.com. Okay, let's talk about the Neely Family Distillery. In 2018, I met Royce Neely at an industry event. He started appearing on our shows, and we became friends during my frequent trips to Kentucky. Today, he is amongst the leaders of young distillers leaving their mark on the bourbon industry. A visit to Neely Family Distillery yields insight on their unique family history, why their products are special, and gives you the opportunity to taste their whiskey, moonshine, and creams. Check them out at NeelyFamilyDistillery.com or visit them in Sparta, Kentucky.
I'm Davey Waltz.
And I'm Adina.
And you're listening to the Bourbon Daily.
From 1998 to 2007, Jerry Dalton served Jim Beam as the only non-family member master distiller in the history of the company. Unlike his good friend and predecessor, Booker Noe, who focused on the artistry of whiskey making, Jerry Dalton was focused on the science of the process. His legacy includes serving as a mentor to Fred Noe, who would follow him in the role of master distiller, as well as the Jim Beam Harvest Series, which features whiskeys made from non-conventional grains. After retiring from Beam, Jim has kept a low profile, but after catching an earlier episode of The Bourbon Show about his career, he reached out to the team here about coming on the show. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Mr. Jerry Dalton.
Hey, Jerry, how you doing?
Doing fine. How you guys doing?
Oh, great.
Oh, we're great.
Yeah, really appreciate you joining us today. We're very excited about this. And, of course, we want to hear about your career, your contributions to the bourbon industry, but we always like to start these interviews by asking our guests about their life on a personal basis. So if you don't mind, just tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I grew up in Bowling Green, Kentucky. I'm an old Kentucky boy from way back. Got my undergraduate degree from Western Kentucky University, and I also met my beautiful wife, Judy, of 57 years. There, we were married in 1962. Things were very busy for me when I sum them up. By the time I was 25, I was married. I had a child, I had a PhD from the University of Louisville, and I had served 6 years in the Marine Corps Reserve. So, very busy time. I've lived and worked in North and South Carolina, but ultimately we found our way back to Bardstown, Kentucky, bourbon capital of the world, and we're currently living in Louisville.
Okay.
And we always find it fascinating to understand and hear about someone's journey into the spirits industry. And as you said, you went to school at University of Louisville. You studied chemistry there, but at the time, was working at a distillery something you even had considered?
Well, I'd like to say it was part of a grand plan, but if I did, it wasn't mine. I meandered through fibers, coatings, electronics. For a time, I owned and operated a small environmental lab in eastern Kentucky, and finally, the muse struck, and we decided to move back closer to Louisville and landed in Bardstown. So distilling wasn't just on the radar there; it was all around, and happily so. So it was a real boon for me to have wandered into that situation.
So, if you don't mind, just tell us a little bit about getting started at Jim Beam.
Well, the truth is, I started with Jim Beam 10 years before I hired into Jim Beam. When I first came to Bardstown, I'd landed a job as chief chemist at Barton Brands, and the industry at the time I came in was facing an industry-wide technical problem. So the result was, through the Kentucky Distillers Association, right away I became acquainted with a lot of people, and especially at Beam, in operations and their QC effort. So by the time I actually hired into Beam, I already had a good working relationship, especially with Booker. I literally, when I moved to Bardstown, chose one of two rental houses that were available. We wanted to get to know the place a little before we bought, and the one I chose in a position of absolute abject ignorance was literally in Booker's backyard.
Really?
So, I'm a walking embodiment of the old Southern maxim, and even a blind hog finds an acre now and again.
Yeah.
So I started in there, and having a foot in Booker's back door was about as good an introduction to the bourbon making business as you could possibly have. Also, might add, I spent a good bit of time crawling around on the top of the old Heaven Hill distillery with Parker Beam, Of course, that distillery burned later on. So I was extremely lucky to wander into the situation that I did. One little story. When I finally did hire Andy Beam as a distillery manager at the Boston plant, I met Bobby Hagan, a senior supervisor who was a grizzled veteran of distilleries and had worked for Booker for years. And when we got introduced, Bobby said, "I know who you are. You and Booker would get together on the weekend. And Monday morning, we'd put in 10 miles of pipe trying out new ideas."
So when you started there, what other jobs did you have at the distillery prior to becoming the master distiller there at Beam?
Well, at Beam, oddly enough, I only had 2 jobs. When I hired in as distillery manager of the Boston plant, and after 2 years, was named master distiller. By the time I retired, my title was double-barreled and cumbersome. I was master distiller, and I was also senior director of quality control, environmental health, and safety. So,
holy cow!
I was also in charge of rubber bands, paper clips, and things somebody else did.
Oh, sure, yeah.
That's cool. So, and you mentioned him already. Booker No is this kind of larger-than-life character. Your neighbor. At this point. So, do you have any Booker No stories from your experiences with him?
Well, the thing about Booker No is that there's about 1,000 stories, and most of them have been retold many times. My personal favorite, when I was at Barton, Mark Waymack and Jim Harris were a couple of guys that were collecting information for a book they were writing on American whiskeys, and they came by to visit with me. We had a nice tour of the distillery, and when we were wrapping up, they mentioned that their next stop was going to be at Booker's house, and they were going to talk with him. They also mentioned that they had been to Wild Turkey, and when they told Jimmy where they were going, ultimately, Jimmy Russell told them to tell Booker that he didn't know jack about making whiskey. Waymack and Harris were a little uncertain about that, so they asked me what I thought, and I told them, by all means, share that with Booker. He'll get a big laugh about it. Well, they did. They went to Booker's house, except as soon as they left Barton, I got Booker on the phone and told him what was going to happen. Booker asked
you doubled back, yeah.
Roar. And, I told him that he should roar, and roar he did. I don't know if y'all ever knew Booker, but a man of his stature, both literally and figuratively, when they roar, it's a seismic event.
Oh, yes.
So he roared, and Waymack Harris and a couple of marketing people fainted. But Booker let them know that they'd been set up. So,
Awesome.
That's great. Well, Jerry, you talk about the size of the man, and I've got a good buddy in Chuck Cowdery, and Chuck tells the story about when Booker put his arm around Chuck and said, "You know what, Chuck? You and me, we full-grown men." And there was a time when Chuck came up to me. I'm a pretty sizable guy myself, and Chuck put his arm around me and said, "Evan, you and me, we full-grown men." And so that was a real highlight for me to kind of be one step removed from Booker No.
Well, occasionally the topic of size would come up, and I'm a pretty fair-sized lad myself. I used to tell people that when Booker and Fred and I were in the same room, you had over half a ton of distillers.
That's Steve, me, and Bo.
There's
sometimes,
one other
too.
Booker story I'd like to
Oh,
share.
yes.
and,
Hey,
Oh, yeah.
we want to hear it.
that you probably haven't heard this one, but early on at one of the early bourbon galas, Booker was it was held at my old Kentucky home, and Booker was decked out in the requisite tux and sitting on a wrought iron bench near the rotunda, and he was holding court with gala guests and bourbon enthusiasts. And I caught a rare moment when he was by himself, and I sat down beside him, and I said, "Booker, I want to get my picture made with an icon in the bourbon business." And I pointed to my wife, Judy, who's standing nearby with the camera. And Booker sort of fluffed his feathers and started getting positioned for the photo. And I said, "Do you know where I can find one?" I got a semi-roar and a damn out of Booker on that one. But we got a good laugh and got a picture made.
Well, you sound like you're able to hold your own with all this
Yeah.
back and forth with Booker, so I love it. Yeah, it's good stuff. So, take us to that time. Booker's ready to retire, but Fred wasn't quite ready to take over the job. So I assume there had to be a lot of, turmoil going on and with that transition of the role. What do we do with this? And how did it come about that you entered into the scene?
Well, actually, when that situation arose, there was basically three different things going on. First, Booker retired from operations, but he didn't retire from the marketing PR effort.
Mm-hmm.
So Booker was still doing a lot of tastings and a lot of bourbon events and generally doing what Booker did. I came in about that time and started learning the Boston distillery and the beam distilling process in general. And of course, I was adding to a lot of stuff I already knew from that earlier industry-wide thing I spoke of. So I was, and I also might mention I got pressed into service as a tour guide at the Boston distillery. And thereby I started learning a little bit about marketing and PR, about which I knew a little bit less than nothing. And the third thing that was going on was Fred. Fred had been working for years in the bottling house at Claremont, and he was extremely knowledgeable about the whole line of products. He also obviously got a daily dose of bourbon lore, operations detail, and PR info from his dad. He was an integral part of dozens of events at the Beam House. So after 2 years at Boston, I was knowledgeable enough to fill the technical and operational aspects of being a master distiller. Fred obviously had a terrific working knowledge of products and packaging and bourbon in general. Operations assessed Fred and decided to fill in some gaps by having him spend time with shift supervisors at both distilleries. And he also spent some time with me where I bored him with all kinds of stuff ranging from yeast to the Latin name for white oak.
Which is?
Pardon?
Which is?
Quercus alba. You were testing me, right?
Very good.
But anyhow, the whole thing sounds like a tremendous hodgepodge of stuff. But fact is that marketing and operations combined to fill in some of the operational gaps in Fred's knowledge and a lot of the operation or the marketing gaps in my knowledge. And when we got done, basically they had started not from absolute zero training two different guys to be master distillers. They had simply enhanced some of the things that needed enhancing. And the whole thing was built on a mutual respect, a lot of three-way contact, but most importantly of all, Fred and I learned a lot from each other, but ultimately we sat at the knee of the greatest man in the business, Booker Noe.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, definitely. So you talk about this, and obviously stepping in as the master distiller there, and those are some huge shoes to fill, just not just physically, but just his presence overall in the industry. For you, what was it like to step in to be the master distiller for the largest bourbon company in the world?
It was absolutely amazing from beginning to end. Surreal. I did everything from statistical analysis on process parameters to filling sandbags at Boston in the flood of '97. I might add that during that flood, Fred drove the boat that we hauled distillery workers in from the high ground up the road. To
he was the captain?
Yeah, he was the captain.
That's great.
I'm sure that would have been an interesting boat ride.
I've heard that story before, that they were voted, but I never heard Fred was the captain.
Oh, yeah. Fred was, as far as I remember, he was, in fact, the only guy.
Really?
Who drove the boat. There may have been others, but I don't remember. I remember that very specifically because with me in one end of the boat and Fred in the other, there wasn't room for a hell of a lot of people. We were hunkered down in between behind the flood walls and dikes and such, and we slowed down production during that 4 or 5 days, but we never stopped. And we would have, if we'd gone one more day, separated from the grain trucks, we would have had to quit. But we actually ran the distillery through the entire flood. That was one obviously lasting aspect of being master distiller there. But I was also, I'm a terrible numbers dweeb. My degree is in physical chemistry, which is sort of the mathematical branch of chemistry. Mm-hmm. And I was in hog heaven when I realized that I could sit in my office and tap literally hundreds of sensing points in both distilleries at the same time. So I spent a lot of time. I got a reputation there. The new operators at the distillery were told that if they should spit one of the 19,000 gallon fermenters, I'd know it. So, but all in all, it was, I've been places that I never thought I'd go, and I got to talk with people from all over the world, and it was a mind-blowing experience for me, and I might add it was an honor and a privilege.
Wow. You talk about this, and correct me if I'm wrong. You were during your tenure there. It was from I think '98 to 2007. You were the master distiller, and if you think about the industry at the time, for several decades prior, bourbon whiskey and rye whiskey really was not on the radar for a lot of people. It was really kind of in a slump. And being around 98, 99, really started seeing a rise in the industry. How you talk about numbers and analysis, how were you able to even, looking at the size of Beam, try to keep up with, not knowing what really the boom was going to be able to produce the volume needed for what the company was to provide in the years to come?
There's somebody in the corporate offices has got one fine crystal ball. I don't know. When you stop and think about it, it's Beam White Label, number one at that time, and probably still is.
It is, yeah.
Number one selling bourbon in the world. And then you go up to Black Label. I remember specifically, there were years when we were doing so well with Black Label that we were scratching, trying to figure out how we were going to keep the inventory where it needed to be to have Black Label to sell, and then factor in Knob Creek and the other ultra premiums. So the result was it wasn't like deciding what you're going to sell next year. It was deciding what you're going to sell 4 years out to 9 years out at that time. And on top of that, how much of each of those products you're going to sell. So like I said, I don't know how those guys did it. I don't know how they even got close. But we just made whiskey. I'm glad I didn't have to worry about that part of it.
Well, you definitely made some darn good whiskey. I'll say that. And I think it's good for people to keep in perspective that in 2007, when you retired, today we look at some of the 12, 13, 14-year-old Knob Creek bottles that are out there and some of the other products that are on the shelf from Beam. We're drinking the distillate you produced while you're there.
Yeah. Yeah.
So this is
toward the end of this thing. I'll have another little thing to say about that. So we'll come back.
Okay.
We'll
circle back. To that.
We'll come back.
Sure.
We'll come back to that.
Yeah.
So
I've got something for you. I'm curious. You've talked a little bit about Booker No, and Fred has kind of mingled into these conversations. But do you have any specific stories about Fred? Having fun with him, or anything kind of goofy or silly that he did in your time there?
Well, let me just back up and say about Fred and me. We are obviously we came at the business from two different directions, and Fred, he was on the road some of those years. It was like Fred. It's a miracle he didn't forget where Bardstown was. He was gone much. And he was a champion bourbon man. He spread the Beam family lore. He talked about products. He did tastings. And they kept me a little closer to home. I don't know if it had anything to do with not knowing how to act or what. But anyhow, I stayed closer to home and supplied when they had what they called some of the tough crowds came in that they anticipated a lot of operations and aging questions. They cut me loose on them, knowing full well that I'd tell them more than they wanted to know, as I mentioned earlier, and I also became adept at telling some really convincing lies, but we won't discuss it. But Fred and I, working in tandem, we were like an old-fashioned double-barrel shotgun with a different load in each barrel, depended on the target, which trigger got pulled first. But between us, we damn well had it covered. Now, back to Fred and stories. Living right behind Booker and Fred was quite an experience, and the one story that I can tell is Fred went to a concert one night, and being the friendly fellow that he was, he invited the band back to spend the night at his house. Next morning, I got up and looked out the kitchen window, which meant I was looking directly into the open gate in Fred's driveway and the fence, and what I spied there was the boys in the band standing shoulder to shoulder, taking a collective whiz. I don't know if it was a synchronized salute to Fred's hospitality or they were doing a wet autograph on the driveway. Anyhow, that happened a quarter of a century ago, so I'm daresome to name the band, but if you'll pardon me, the long and the short of it is, if I saw them again, I'd recognize them.
Oh, that's outstanding. Thank you for sharing that. Now, I know in addition to serving at Jim Beam, you were also part of the project to bring distilling back to Mount Vernon. Can you tell us a little bit about that, bringing distilling back to Mount Vernon?
Yeah, Beam's involvement, along with the other distilleries, came through Discus, being members of Discus, the Distilled Spirits Council of the United States, and they're located in Washington, and they were working really closely with the historical folks at Mount Vernon, investigating Washington's connection to distilling. There's a company in Louisville called Vendome that they're They do all kinds of process vessels and work for the distilling industry. And they went up to the Smithsonian and made exact measurements of a still that was up there. It's called an alembic. It's a pot still. And it had 1787 stamped in the handle, so they knew it was from Washington's era. Vendome fabricated an exact replica of that, and they were going to use it in the restoration of Washington's distillery, which at that time was an archaeological dig, literally right there by the grist mill at Mount Vernon. Well, they got the thing built, and somebody thought about it a while and decided that discretion was a better part of valor, so they might ought to make a trial run with it. And it fell my lot to make the first run with that alembic at Jim Beam, literally. Mm-hmm. I made application. I'm the guy who got the license for the original still.
Oh, wow.
At Mount Vernon. And so I did that in order not to get busted for moonshine, and Jim Beam took that kind of. I was honored to make the first whiskey that came off that still, but I thought about it and realized that it could be argued that I was the most expendable master distiller in Discus. But anyhow, I managed to get through the run without blowing anything up.
That's a good day.
Pardon?
So that makes for a good day.
Yeah, it was. It was an extraordinary day. Chris Morris up at Brown Foreman actually made a mash that essentially duplicated the grist mill records that showed what they were distilling at, fermenting and distilling at Mount Vernon. So I ran off a couple of proof gallons of what has to be the most costly rye whiskey that was ever made. We shipped the still then up to Mount Vernon, and I'm told that Dave Pickerel made a trial run, a second trial run, and with a good firebox under the thing, and got a little zealous with the fire stoking and blew the top off the still. but the next day they had a public event, and we didn't douse anybody with hot mash, and made some more surprisingly good rye whiskey.
So you mentioned Dave Pickerel already, but that team that was assembled to work for the George Washington Mount Vernon Distillery, that's really kind of an all-star team when you factor in yourself, Ken Pierce, Dave Pickerel, as you said, Lincoln Henderson, and, of course, Jimmy Russell as well. You know, what involvement did you have with all of them, and what was it like to sort of learn from them at the same time as they were probably learning from you?
Oh, well, it was great working with a group of people like that, and especially on something with the historical connections to George Washington and Mount Vernon. But I remember some of those guys in a broader context. Jimmy Russell, for example, ran across Jimmy and many times, and I remember specifically one time having a layover lunch at the Cincinnati airport while Jimmy and I were both waiting for connecting flights, and we sat and had a quiet talk about some pretty obscure stuff to most folks, but it was quite interesting talking with Jimmy about distilling. I might also add that a few years later, I was in Spain representing the KDA, Kentucky Distillers Association, and a comment I heard time and again in a number of places, and somebody invariably would say, Jimmy Russell was here last week. And I came to think of Jimmy as sort of the Daniel Boone of bourbon, blazing a trail across the European Scotch world. So, Lincoln Henderson, I talked with Lincoln on and off many times, and had discussions about things like the bacterial wee beasties that sneak into distilleries and set up shop and where they might be located and how to beat them down. So Lincoln and I had a good technical relationship. And finally, Dave Pickerel, I was truly shocked and saddened. I honestly didn't know David passed away until I started getting myself ready for this interview. And he and I shared data on warehouse losses and many other bits of information over the years. And we shared a good many glasses of whiskey, not the least of which was the White Dog off the Olympic at Mount Vernon. But in the final analysis, I think Dave and I are cut from the same mold. We both love making bourbon.
Yeah.
Here.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, one of the things, obviously, you do love making bourbon, and you've been doing a great job at it, or you did, for many, many years. And I was excited to kind of realize that you were the man behind the Harvest series at Jim Beam. And that, of course, is the brown rice, the soft red wheat, 6-row barley, whole rolled oat, and then I always butcher this, but the triticale.
Yeah, close enough. I know
close enough. Which is a hybrid, right? Of wheat and rye.
I'm sorry.
That's a hybrid of wheat and rye, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah. So I thought, could you talk a little bit about what went into, that Harvest series and what each of those different grains sort of brought to the bourbon?
Well, you're going to be surprised at this answer, but just a little background. The original notion that I had there was I got it from the master blenders of Scotch. I had gone to Scotland to introduce the sales force there to bourbon, but the side benefit that I got was I discovered what an amazing broad array of different tastes there were in Scotch whiskey, and the blenders were just absolute masters of putting together things and making those tastes. So I got to thinking about, was there any way that we could have some of that same sort of latitude in bourbon? And I got permission from my boss then to run a little experiment down at the Boston Distillery. And you have to realize a little experiment at the Boston Distillery consisted of around 17,000 gallons of mash. So,
wow. Yeah.
So we made up a fermenter each of those grains in the mash bill. They were all met the legal requirements for being bourbon, and they all had 51% corn or more. And we used the various small grains that you mentioned and made a fermenter each of those whiskeys. I tasted them as soon as they came off the still. I would eat up with curiosity, and so I tasted the White Dog as soon as each batch came off, and made notes. And I tasted them again a couple of times during the aging process. But now we're going to get to the strange part. I retired, and the ironic thing is that I didn't even know when those whiskeys went on the market. I didn't know that they had been on the market.
Wow.
So I've never tasted the finished product.
Really?
And I'm looking at three guys who know more about my finished product than I do.
We'll have to get you some bottles, yeah.
Yeah, no kidding. Yeah. That's awesome. Well, it was a great idea that you had there, and we've definitely enjoyed drinking through that. So thank you for that. Switching gears a little bit. One of my biggest, mentors and influences in bourbon is the former Beam brand ambassador who's now at Heaven Hill, and that's Bernie Lubbers. And Bernie has always spoken very highly of you. What can you tell us about your time working with Bernie Lubbers?
Well, I remember when they hired Bernie in to be a Beam ambassador, and for better or for worse, part of his training meant that he had to sit and listen to me carry on. I remember when Bernie first came in and we started having our sessions together, and Bernie was a very personable guy, very likable, and struck me from the absolute get-go as being highly intelligent. And so I would hold forth like I'd learned to from Booker, and but I always had the feeling that Bernie already knew most of the stuff that I was carrying on about, and was just too polite to tell me. But anyhow, if I did teach anything new to Bernie, well, I was glad to do it, and I got to say I'm terrifically pleased to see how well he's doing in the bourbon business. I hope he continues to have a long and successful career.
You know, and another person from the industry that always speaks highly of you, and matter of fact, I've seen several interviews where Pamela Heilman, who used to work with you at Beam and is now the master distiller at Michter's, always lists you as a mentor and someone who had a big role in getting her to where she's at today. What was your experience in working with Pamela?
Well, Pam hired in as a relief supervisor, which meant when the regular supervisors were off at either Boston or Claremont, she filled in for them, vacations, 6 days and whatever else. But in spite of that, well, I should mention that also meant that Pam immediately learned the quirks about two nearly identical, but not quite identical distilleries. So it was a great hands-on experience for her. Mm-hmm. But it also meant that there was a couple of days a week that she didn't have to be covering for somebody. So operations management assigned her to work for me. I was working at the time on something we called the Total Quality Management Program. And what that meant was that Pam spent a lot of time at my direction rooting around in computer records and identifying key metrics that defined the mashing, the fermenting, the distilling, and the aging process. And so she spent a lot of time assembling that information, and in doing so, she became acquainted with what I refer to as the inner workings and hidden mechanisms of the whole distilling process. Later on, she moved up through distillery operations from shift supervisor. I honestly don't know where she ended up in the management hierarchy, but it was obvious she continued to learn. Mm-hmm. And so she, in my mind, is what I think of as a classical master distiller, one that's been in the trenches and also one who's had to manage the whole thing. I absolutely can't imagine her doing anything other than a great job for Michter's.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm. She definitely is. Yeah. Yep.
So, Jerry, obviously, one of our favorite things to do is to sit here and listen about some of the legends and the personalities of the legends in the industry. And, of course, you're right up there with all of them. So it's definitely been a privilege for us today. But with that being said, what was it like for you working with Baker Beam, and what can you tell us about him?
Well, unfortunately, I can't say too much about working with Baker because I met Baker the first time when I was at Barton and was still working on that industry-wide problem, which entailed going through a lot of distilleries. So I remember specifically meeting Baker at Beam. Probably I wasn't over 2 years into my 20-year tenure, and Baker impressed me at the time as one of those sort of low-key, behind-the-scenes guys who, with great quiet competence, keep the wheels turning.
Yeah.
Who does that sound like? You guys have something in common, huh?
But by the time I hired on at Beam, Baker had retired and was at that time, he was driving 18-wheelers and his motorcycle, both of which he did for fun. I remember going to Baker's house one time with several bottles of his namesake whiskey out of the small batch collection to get them signed. And Baker showed me his big bike like a proud papa. He had a beautiful motorcycle, and I'm sure he went many miles on it. But he was always an inventor. I knew that from some of the fingerprints he left on the distillery by the time I became acquainted with it. And he showed me a thing that he had made. It was it had a bottle rest in it that exactly fit a bottle of Baker's, and it had an arm and hand rest, and he could put a bottle of Baker's in that thing and take his pen and sign Baker's bottle perfectly with no drips, smears.
Really?
I did when I signed bottles. And so he demonstrated the use of the thing by signing several bottles. I also got to tell you, there's on my sideboard here at the house, and in fact, I saw it recently, the same photo in a newsletter from down in the South. But my favorite photo is of Booker and Baker, and me standing in between, and in front of us is a commemorative 9 millionth barrel that they did, like I said, to commemorate that. And I saw myself stand between those two men as stand between the yang and the yin of bourbon making, the active and the quiet strength. That collectively, those two men epitomize all of bourbon making.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, I wanted to give you the opportunity. I have here this beautiful pink and teal book that is called The Tao Te Ching, A New Approach. And I think the most interesting thing that I'd like you to maybe talk about is your philosophy summed up in 4 words. What are those 4 words?
Well, you're probably looking for mundane events, mystical process. The people who did that cover on the back of that tome you're looking at got that wrong. But mundane event, mystical process. By the way, that's great reading for the toilet, but
I was a philosophy major in college, so this is right up my alley.
Oh, really?
Yes, sir. Yep. So, yeah, I thought maybe you could talk about mundane events and mystical process. I thought that was a really cool, kind of 4-word summation. I wanted to hear you maybe flesh it out a little bit.
Okay, I'll have to apologize. You really were breaking up on that, but I think
sorry about
that. About 35 years ago was when I encountered the Tao Te Ching, and it's, as you know, an ancient writing. It dates from somewhere between 300 BCE and 600 BCE is when it got written down. It's probably a verbal tradition before that. I encountered it, and I had a couple of copies of it, which I read about 5 times each. And as you know, it's not a long book. And when I got done reading it, I said to myself, what in the world is this about? Mm-hmm. So I decided to study the book seriously, and I did so over a period of years. When I finished up, I had over 30 English language translations that had been published over a period of around a century. And I read every one of them at least 5 times. A couple of them I practically committed to memory, and when I got done, I said, what in the world is this about? So I decided to study it seriously. And I went on and read for a long time, and some point along the way in my notes, I realized I had written my own book. It was a compilation of the translations and interpretations of about 30 scholars and a few dreadful hacks, but nonetheless, they all taught me something. And so then I signed the dumbest publishing contract in the history of publishing. The associate editor at the place that I signed on referred to it as almost criminal, but I learned two lessons. One was never to sign another publishing contract without somebody helping me that was knowledgeable about negotiation. But the second lesson I learned, and it was the most important one, was to paraphrase Jimmy Russell's message to Booker. I didn't know jack about Chinese mysticism. So I've spent a good many hours, hundreds of hours literally, delving into mysticism, and I've read thousands of pages of Plotinus, Evelyn Underhill, Thomas Merton, a guy from Bardstown, more or less. And I'm now, I feel like I'm ready to expose my ignorance yet again, so I'm writing another book.
Writing another one, okay.
But outstanding.
I don't want to see no dumb publishing contracts.
Oh, that's outstanding. Well, I'm looking forward to that. And, one of the things that we've had a lot of fun with as we've gone to these events in the industry is getting to know these master distillers and, former master distillers, emeritus, all of those. And we never see you. We want to see you at these events. Why have you stayed away? And is there any chance we'll see you in the future?
Well, I got to say this. For 20 years, I was deeply, obviously, immersed in the world of bourbon and distilling, and I covered a lot of ground, both literally and figuratively. Had enormous good luck to know people like Booker and Parker and some of the others, and I learned as much as I could about bourbon history, which, by the way, there's a ton of stuff out there, and some of it's good factual stuff, and some of it is akin to a commodity commonly found in pastures. But I also read all the technical and operational engineering stuff I could get my hands on. So all of that was sloshing around my brain in 2007, and I took the word retirement to heart. I retired and spent a lengthy period to study and consider all of that mystical process and my role in it. That brief summary you were looking at, you're not going to get anything brief out of me.
Sure.
There's a deeper meaning to everything, and behind the most mundane events, there's a hidden process, and we can all tap it, and I'm going to tap it literally like tapping a barrel and relate it to distilling.
Mm-hmm. So here we are, more than a decade removed from your time at Beam. And like Evan said, we certainly would love to see you at more events. And I think you'd find that people really want to hear your story. And that's why we're so excited about this episode today, obviously. People are going to love, that you're checking in here. So hopefully we will see you at some things in the future. But as we wrap up here, if you had an opportunity now, again, more than a decade removed, to kind of self-assess, your time in the bourbon industry, what do you reflect back on?
Well, I think I'm a little embarrassed to talk about my legacy in anything, but anyhow, I think of my legacy, if there is such a thing, for me, on three levels. First thing is, I always wondered if I'd ever get my name on a bottle of bourbon. And that came to pass just this year. There's a fellow over in North Carolina named Mark Boyce who went to Beam for a personal barrel selection, and he bought a barrel of Knob Creek. When he had it bottled, he named it Master Distiller J. Dalton's Legacy.
Wow.
And nothing to do with that. He did that, and I got Mark to thank for his kindness, generosity, and recognition. So that's the one level.
That's awesome.
The second level, I hope is that will last is my reputation for knowledge of the process. Some of the highest praise I ever had in the business came from Parker Beam. The PR guys over at Heaven Hill got a question from a guy in Scotland about water, and he was a college professor and a bourbon enthusiast, and they fired off an answer, but he persisted with follow-up questions until finally Parker told his PR guy, "Ask Jerry, he'll know." And in a similar vein, there was an old mash hand at Barton who told a person, in fact, it was Chuck Cowdery, I'm pretty sure,
Nice.
doing a documentary. This guy said, "Jerry knows this stuff. By all rights, he shouldn't, but he does." And, so I hope that part of my legacy persists. And finally, I'm hoping that when I finish writing this book, that I'll be able to explore some of the deepest levels of Kentucky's version of what the Celts called whiskey beneath the water of life.
Wow.
Nice.
Wow. Well, Jerry, it's been an absolute joy talking to you today, and like I said, we've had you this interview, and we've dreamt about for 3 years if we started this show.
Yes.
So we're as excited as can be to be able to talk to you today.
It's absolutely my pleasure, and I truly appreciate the opportunity. Thank you very much.
Thank
We'll
you.
have to do it again when your book comes out.
Yep.
Yeah, the pressure's on now.
Yeah, there you go.
Those are choking noises you hear as I go charging off.
There you go.
We will definitely do that. When the book comes out, let us know, and we would be more than happy to have you on. We'll talk about the book and everything, and yeah, I look forward to that day as well.
Okay, and you may want to help me with the publishing contract.
Yeah, we can do that too. That's free of charge. We can look that over. All right, Jerry. Thanks so much, my friend.
Thank you.
All right, take care.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Very good stuff. Great talking today. So we'll wrap things up by talking about where people can find us. And Renee, we'll start with you. Where can people find you?
You can find me on Instagram at Renee M. Howe. You can also find me on Twitter at Renee Howe.
All right, Jeremy.
You can find me online at Instagram, Twitter, or my website at Jeremy Shell.
All right. Like Jeremy, I'm an easy guy to find. I'm at Steve Akeley on Twitter, Instagram, or Facebook. I've got a website that also happens to be steveakeley.com. But we've got that company website as well. Be sure to check that out because you can listen to shows, you can check out our blogs, read Bourbon, Zeppelin, and so much more. ABVnetwork.com. Renee,
I'm going to
anything?
have a website the next time I come back.
Are you?
Yeah. Renee M. Howe. I'm going to have a website.
Okay.
I guarantee it.
Oh, I can't wait to see what's on there. This is exciting. So
Okay. That's
something
be
to look
good.
forward to.
Yeah, but before I do that, I want to let everyone know to please go ahead and give us a 5-star review and include a comment. It really helps in the marketing of the show, and your feedback really helps motivate us and get us websites.
I thought she screwed up, but then I was like, no, that's what she meant to say. Yeah.
No, that's what I meant to say.
Yeah. Very cool stuff. Of course, we'll have a brand new show for you guys very soon. So pleased today to be able to present this one with Jerry Dalton. We'll have something equally as cool for you very soon. Take care, everybody. See you.
Goodbye, everyone.
Ciao.
Before we finish the show, let's talk about some great companies that support the ABV network. First up is Moonshine Still Pro. Moonshine Still Pro has a full line of products to help the home distiller. Whether you want to experiment on the stove in your kitchen or you're looking for a bigger setup in your backyard, owner Russell Creed and his team can help. They have multiple still offerings, accessories, and even grain from their partners at Goldstone Mill to assist you in making whiskey on par with your favorite distillery. They can also help you with some fabricated parts you probably can't make yourself if you are attempting a DIY still project. Learn more or order your still or parts at moonshinestillpro.com. Another friend of ours is the Goldstein family at Goldstone Mill. The Goldsteins offer a variety of heritage and heirloom grains to make the finest whiskeys in the world. Plus, they are more than just a grain company. They are truly consultants to make sure the grains they are providing to you or your business meet your highest expectations. Additionally, they work with mills around the country, ensuring shipping is as low as possible for their customers. If you're a distillery, brewery, or even doing this at home, Goldstone can assist you. Check them out at goldstonemill.com, call them at 217-254-6613, or check in via email at hello@goldstonemill.com. Last but not least is the ABV Barrel Shop. While we don't get to play in the allocated bourbon game because we aren't selling the other products you have to do to get those, we do have access via our friendships in the bourbon industry to some really cool stuff. Have you ever seen your favorite craft distiller selling some really cool limited offerings only in their gift shop? I'm talking things like the hazmat offering Distillery 291 did for their 10th anniversary, or Neely Family Distillery's Papaw's birthday barrel. They don't have enough of it to send it out to distributors, so they only sell it via their gift shop. Well, companies like Distillery 291 and Neely Family Distillery have agreed to sell us 2 or 3 cases of these offerings moving forward, meaning our store will have the access to some of the rarest whiskeys in the world. Way more difficult to come by than the allocated bourbon offerings with the national release. Yes, they will be extremely tough to come by, but if you're a customer of our store, you'll have a chance to get them. Get signed up for our email or text list over at abvbarrelshop.com so you don't miss out.
The Bourbon Daily is part of the ABV Network. For more information or to become a sponsor, please visit abvnetwork.com. Thanks for listening and cheers.
This has been a Steve Akeley production.